Welcome to American Press Productions, independent political analysis. These are today's top stories. Dear white people who would like to know another way your amazing powers of oppression take form to abuse non-whites, USA Today claims the air that Americans breathe isn't equal. They cite a study titled "Inequity in Consumption of Goods and Services Adds to Racial Ethnic Disparities in Air Pollution Exposure," which apparently found that pollution is disproportionately caused by whites but disproportionately inhaled by black and Hispanic minorities. The study compared a type of pollution known as PM 2.5, small particulate matter that is breathed in and trapped in our lungs. It looked at the many sources of PM 2.5 from the production of goods and services, then analyzed which racial groups consumed those goods and services, then compared the amount of known PM 2.5 breathed in by those groups. This isn't some grand conspiracy where whites are consuming more than minority groups while forcing those minority groups to breathe in our pollution. It's simply a matter of economics. The more money you have, the more you can spend on goods and services, the larger your contribution to causing pollution. It is likely no innocent mistake that Asian Americans were grouped under the term whites for this study. Asian Americans have a median household income 31% higher than whites, 74% higher than Hispanics, and over 100% higher than blacks. If Asian Americans were given their own group, this study would likely not be given national attention, because it would be far more difficult to demonize whites. So instead, they grouped Asians and whites together. This study is just another way of looking at the consequences of poverty in America. If America was 100% white, would the pollution just disappear? Would the areas currently affected not be lived in anymore, simply because there would be no non-white people to live there? The sixth most populated state in America, West Virginia, also has the fourth highest poverty rates, and the state is 95.7% white. The most polluted state in America is Indiana, at 84% white. Pollution cuts across racial lines. This study only feeds pointless victimization found in identity politics. Its findings are about as productive as telling its white authors to go suck a tailpipe to reduce the disproportional racial rates of air pollution exposure. Perhaps next up for this group, they can explain the disproportional rates of violence between racial groups in America, or the disproportional rates of media ownership, news, and entertainment by a certain religious ethnic group. The following story is part of our previous coverage of the developing situation in the Golan Heights between Israel and Syria and both of their respective allies. Today, the U.S. State Department released its annual Global Human Rights Report. The usual description of the Golan Heights has been changed from Israeli-occupied to Israeli-controlled. The area has never been officially internationally recognized as belonging to Israel, only occupied. On Monday, Senator Lindsey Graham toured the area alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On Tuesday, the Washington Post broke a story about a meeting between former Vice President Dick Cheney and Vice President Mike Pence, where Cheney forcefully questioned Pence on the Trump administration's foreign policy and decision to pull troops out of Syria. Reuters reports that a State Department official said, quote, "The policy on the status of the territories has not changed," end quote. Netanyahu is scheduled later this month to travel to Washington, where he will address the pro-Israeli lobby AIPAC. He reportedly also plans to meet with Trump, and that the Golan Heights will be part of their discussion. More and more, the pieces move to push for a U.S.-backed Israeli war with Syria and her allies, Iran and Russia, a potentially devastating and ultimately unnecessary conflict that only Israel would benefit from. Former Governor of Colorado, Democrat John Hickenlooper, recently announced his presidential campaign, and he has already committed a mortal sin in the eyes of the Democratic Party. He said he was willing to work with Republicans should he be elected president. Former advisor for the 2016 Clinton campaign, Brian Fallon, said of this, quote, "Happy talk about coming together with the Republicans is not going to fly," end quote. A former advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, said he holds the opinion, along with other Democrats, in regards to the thought of bipartisan efforts to reach out to Republicans, quote, "Hell no," end quote. Last week, Joe Biden referred to Vice President Mike Pence as a decent man. Democrats and liberals complained and criticized that even mild praise of Mike Pence is unacceptable. Biden, showing the strength of his spine, apologized for the comment. Democrats are still anxiously waiting to see if Biden will announce a 2020 presidential run, but not because they want him to. Rather, as analysts over at CNN have pointed out, he's an old white man. New Hampshire State Representative Wendy Thomas said, quote, "I love him. I think he needs to step aside, and we need to get a younger perspective and youthful energy," end quote. Though Biden has received some support, Union President of the International Association of Firefighters, Harold Schatberger, said they are all in for Joe Biden, although he did admit that many of his union members voted for Trump in 2016, so perhaps his assertion is a little off the mark. In a recent speech given by Biden, he said, quote, "We can't be divided by race, religion, by tribe," end quote. An odd thing for him to say, given that in a previous speech, Biden said he supported an unrelenting wave of hordes of non-white immigrants flooding into America to replace those of European descent and turn them into a minority in their own country. Now Biden is reaping the consequences of his racist views against whites. Currently, around 40% of the population of America are non-whites. The vast majority of them vote Democrat, and their voice is becoming increasingly clearer. They won't vote for white candidates. Give them someone who looks like themselves. It's time to pack it in and step aside, Joe. The mess you've helped create doesn't want you.